Giorgio Vasari, 1511 to 1574, a child prodigy who took master classes from Guglielmo di Marsillat before graduating to the circle of the perfect painter Andrea del Sarto and his pupils Rosso Fiorentino and Jacopo Pontormo. He was befriended by the Big Mick, whose painting style would influence him his entire life. As an architect, commissioned by his patron Cosimo I, he enlarged the Palazzo Vecchio, designed and built the Uffizi, renovated the churches of Santa Maria Novella and the Santa Croce. His most famous oeuvre, though, was the Vasari Corridor, connecting the Palazzo Vecchio to the Uffizi and finally to the Palazzo Pitti. As an artist, painting in the Mannerist style, he painted 6 monstrous frescoes on the walls of the Cinquecento room, the 500 room, in the Palazzo Vecchio between 1555 and 72. He also did 39 panels of the ceiling, great episodes from the life of his patron Cosimo I. In the Studiolo, small study, Vasari's school painted the 4 elements: water, fire, earth, and air. In the Duomo, he painted the Last Judgment on the inside of the dome. Giorgio coined the term Renaissance, Rinascita in Italian. As an author, he published the first art book, Le vite dei più eccellenti architetti, pittori e scultori italiani, da Cimabue insino a tempi nostri, in 1550. It was rewritten and enlarged in 1558. Translated, it means the lives of the best Italian architects, painters, and sculptors from Cimabue to the present. The Uffizi Gallery is a metaphor for Vasari's life. We remember the building not for itself, but rather for the works of all the other famous painters. Enough about the man. Let's take a tour of his famous yet little-known corridor that connected the Medici's Palazzo Pitti with the Palazzo Vecchio, the ducal palace. The Vasari corridor starts, for us, though for Cosimo I, ends in the Palazzo Vecchio's 2nd floor, in the Sala Verde, the green room. A small door gains you access to the passageway that leads to the 3rd floor of the Uffizi. Giorgio Vasari built this corridor on the 2nd floor of all the buildings by order of Cosimo I in 1565 in just 5 months. Think of all the candles it took. This was to allow the Grand Duke and Duchess to walk in perfect security without bodyguards from their residence in the Palazzo Pitti, over the Arno on the 2nd floor of the Ponte Vecchio, through the ducal offices of the Uffizi, to the formal council chambers of the Palazzo Vecchio. We're doing it backwards. Typical Italian chaos. Look closely. The passageway ends up in the east wing of the Uffizi on the 3rd floor to your left. You have to walk towards the Arno, hang a right and right again before you're in front of the door that leads you down 1 floor to the corridor proper. The staircase down to the corridor proper. This is where all the tours really started. Today all this has probably changed, as the 700 paintings and self-portraits are now on the 2nd floor of the Uffizi. The state offices have been kicked out. Who knows? More Italian chaos. I was privileged, though. I got my own guide just for me. The corridor starts with the self-portraits of Giorgio Vasari, the Big Mick, and Andrea del Sarto. What a beginning! The panoramic rooftop views shows the corridor exiting the Uffizi right along the archways parallel to the Arno, and then left into the Ponte Vecchio. The bloody old bridge. It was really, when the corridor was built in 1565, it was a slaughterhouse. It wasn't until 1693 that goldsmith shops replaced it, on Cosimo's orders. The smell was offensive to his grand ducal nares. Acres and acres of it, all important either because of the subject and or the painter, but you can only absorb just so much. The corridor had to go around instead of demolishing the Manelli Tower. You remember, now owned by Giorgio Armani. The tower represents power, prestige, and a stronghold. The Manellis said nuts, like General McAuliffe at Bastogne, so Cosimo was thwarted. Now, on the Oltrarno side of the river, it crosses over the road running parallel to the river. For a real quirk, it passes through the back of a church, Santa Felicita. You can look through the grille to see the private ducal balcony right in front, and at a distance, the high altar. Here it is in reverse. The grille to the Santa Felicita is on your left, with more portraits yet. We're almost at the end of what tourists were allowed to see. I had to exit the corridor at the Buontalenti Grotto. Bernardo delle Girandole, Bernardo the Stroller, known as Buontalenti, the talented one, was a stage designer, architect, theatrical designer, military engineer, and artist. Among his accomplishments were the decoration of the Pitti Palace and the bubbly gardens with his famous grotto. The close-up of the facade shows Mannerist figures and a realistic representation of a natural grotto with stalactites. The two figures on the wall are copies of two of the Quattro Prigionieri, 4 prisoners, by the Big Mick. This is a close-up of just one of them. Look closely, you'll see other embedded figures as if made out of stalactites themselves. The two figures in the background are Helen and Paris, done by Vincenzo de Rossi. Here they are again from another angle. As I said, I left the corridor at the grotto, but the corridor continues on, as you can see on the left, finally ending up in the Pitti Palace itself. It's been an eventful morning. Now's a good time for a light lunch at the nearby Olio e Convivium. Then tackle the Palazzo Pitti itself. The palace and grounds occupy close to 15 acres. The palace itself is close to 200 rooms. The building was started in 1458 as the town residence of Luca Pitti, a wealthy Florentine banker. The Medici bought it in 1539 and occupied it to the end of their dynasty. It was then occupied by the House of Lorraine, Napoleon, and the House of Savoy. When Florence was briefly capital of the newly united Italy, King Vittorio Emanuele II resided in it until 1871. His grandson, Vittorio Emanuele III, gave the palazzo to be used as a museum to the nation in 1919. The royal apartments, like the king's bedroom, are rich and lavish. After the Medici dynasty played out in 1737 with the death of the Grand Duke Gian Gastone, Tuscany became part of Lorraine under Louis XV, then under Napoleon, then the King of Savoy, who, under the Risorgimento, became the King of United Italy, with Florence as its capital, and the Pitti Palace as the palace. Now let's get even more decorative with antechambers. This is the hall of the third representation. This, the hall of Giovanni da San Giovanni. Finally, the public audience room, where the king receives his abject subjects. Now into overwhelm. The palazzo has 1,000 paintings and many statues. This, the Venus room, done in the Baroque style, as are several of the rooms. They were all done by Pietro da Cortona between 1641 and 47. Each ceiling deals with the education of the prince. In this room, you see Minerva, knowledge, tearing the prince away from Venus's arms. What a cad. You may have missed the statue in the middle of the room. It's Venus Italica, done by the famous nude sculptor Antonio Canova. Remember, he did the Venus Victrix in the Galleria Borghese, posed by Pauline, Napoleon's sister. You saw it in my Europe 2 DVD. Well, this Venus was commissioned by Napoleon in 1810 to replace the Venus Medici, now in the Uffizi. To give you an idea of what you're up against, this is just the Mars room alone. And this, the Prometheus room. This, the Iliad room. There are 10 more rooms like it containing the works of major artists like Andrea del Sarto, Botticelli, Signorelli, Lipino Lippi, Perugino, Titian, Pontormo, Tintoretto, Veronese, Caravaggio, Raphael, Rubens, and Van Dyck. Here are just a few examples of what you'll see in chronological order by artist. Madonna and Child, Background Stories of St. Anne by Lipino Lippi. Gothic, gold, with just a hint of emotion. Portrait of a Woman by Raphael. Buxom, pregnant, with her eyes on the future. Agnolodoni and Maddalena Strozzi by Raphael in 1506. Posed formally, Maddalena, a woman of substance. The Donis ordered this tondo of the Holy Family by Michelangelo at about the same time as their portraits. It's in the Uffizi. What an emotional and tonal difference from the others. Penitent Mary Magdalene by Titian, the most famous of the Venetian artists. A mannerist, exaggerated poses to express emotion. The Consequences of War by Peter Paul Rubens. Masterfully mannerist, poses in extremis, motion and emotion. The Argenti Gallery, anything not painting, sculpture, or porcelain. Here are 3 samples. A goblet in the shape of a shell of German origin. A bird-shaped rock crystal bowl. A vase in lapis lazuli by Buontalenti. No conceit in his family, he's got it all. The day is done, and so am I. The 2 great joys of the Palazzo Pitti is that every time you visit Firenze, it's a must-see. You can spend a whole morning in any one of the major rooms. The second is that it's only 300 yards from the Hotel Pitti Palace. Siesta time, gelato time, e olio e convivium.